Well, folks, I am really honored. I have met and talked to this young lady many times, and she is a person who is on the battlefield in a very serious way and doing some things that some of you may not be aware of, but you need to be. And so it's our pleasure to have her on with us today. Shelli, again, thank you for taking the time to join us. And we know that the notice was fairly short, but we really appreciate it because we know how busy your schedule is. So please, Shelli, introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about who you are and what you're doing right now, and just give people what you feel they need to know about how important the national anthem is and its bicentennial is.
Thank you, Bishop. Well, my name is Dr. Shelli Manuel. My doctorate is in education, and I am a musician. I have a concert level of performance with harp, keyboard, I write music, and I'm known as a national anthem singer. We do patriotic shows for veterans, many others. God has opened up venues for me in most of the state houses and television networks, the Pentagon, the Capitol building. I've been on the Washington Mall several times singing, and we are just very honored every time those opportunities have opened up. It's been a great blessing to be able to study the history of the national anthem. I'm also a historical archivist, researcher, and writer. I wrote books with my husband and his partner, Peter Marshall, Jr., and my husband just recently passed away. Most of you would probably know him from having co-authored The Light and the Glory. So I have a very deep background in our United States history. Things have evolved into this place with Sing It America through a painting that I did. You can go to a website called thisismyflag.org, and you will see a large 12 by 4 foot mural that I painted in 1987 about the blood covenant for our nation, the Christian Judaic roots, and the founding of the country. So as that all began to evolve in my life and I began to sing the anthem as we unveiled it, I was suddenly knit into many more circles of media and political groups on both sides of the fence. And recently, I just had this motto come up in my heart that I want to express to you here. This is a bipartisan or nonpartisan effort, as it should be, for it to be everybody's national anthem. On both the right wing and the left wing, the eagle soars. It cannot soar with one crippled wing. And right now, with what's happening in this nation, if we continue to rend ourselves, faith works by love and not by hatred. If we continue to divide ourselves as we have, our enemies will divide us. So we need a great awakening in both sides of the political equation. We need it everywhere at once in this nation. And that's taking the humbling of ourselves, as I know most of you are very aware of, that we need to be humble before the Lord. And when we go back to the history of the time of our colonial days, our revolution, and then very shortly after the War of 1812, we see that we really are repeating a cycle. After the war was over, the bloody 8-year war of the revolution, the economy soured on people, and they were all too willing very quickly to turn backwards and give everything up to the British. Much of the sector of society that was involved in shipping and export were in that stance, and the British took advantage of it. We've just gone through a government shutdown last year, so we kind of, we know very fresh wounds of what that feels like and what the sentiments are raging around us. Actually, during the colonial times, George Washington in Valley Forge was fighting a battle where most of the Dutch, German countryside around him were not assisting in any way. Less than 3% of the colonial population fought that war and won independence, or we would be singing God Bless the Queen today. He actually stood there watching farmers bounce both coins in their hands and dumping 700 pounds of flour desperately needed for the starving soldiers at Valley Forge in the Schuylkill River right in front of him. So it's always been the brave, and it's always been the few, and it's always been the remnant that had the vision that have stood up and brought this country again and again out of crisis to the liberty that it all enjoy and experience. Now, during 1812, Dolly Madison, on the last day of what we officially know as the war, September 14, she ran from the White House as the British were attacking, asked a servant to take a butcher knife that they were carrying and some tools with them from the kitchen and pause there in one of the hallways and cut out the portrait of George Washington, its canvas from a large frame, rolled it up under her arm and kept running, thinking to herself, surely, that this would be the last government shutdown. And 30 minutes later, the people in Baltimore, nearly 40, 50 miles away, could see this raging fire in Washington and the bright red glow on the horizon. Thank God they weren't too busy to drop what they were doing or too deeply scheduled to go fight that battle and show up at Fort McHenry to bring in reinforcement that day. I also know that my fourth great-grandfather, during the time of the Revolution, was plowing in a field or harvesting in a field when his brother suddenly showed up, grabbed his rifle, kissed his wife of 3 weeks goodbye, never changed the shirt on his back, left the plow or the instrument right where it was in its furrow, where it rusted for 8 years as an enzyme to all that passed by, and marched off with more men from Pennsylvania, starting the Pennsylvania Rifle Company, and went to what would become the Battle of Bunker Hill. We need that kind of snap-to, instant resolve, and backbone in our people today. And that was still there in 1812. When Francis Scott Key showed up that evening, it was because he was on a ship, boarding a ship, sometime that day earlier, to save the life of Dr. Bean, his friend from Annapolis, who was going to be executed as a punishment for offering aid and assistance medically to both the young American colony and also the British. And the British admiral was chiding Francis Scott Key on board that ship that night. He was saying, you see over there, when the morning comes and the dawn's early light appears, there will be the British flag flying, and that rebel flag will be gone once and for all. They want our gold coins. And I read where Francis Scott Key, who was also a lay preacher, said to him, no, the American people would rather crawl on their knees to defend that flag than march on their feet to surrender to a sovereign. And he would listen to the cry of those in charge of the firing line of the cannons, which really couldn't reach the British, but it gave a fierce bout at least. And the cry was, ho, say. And he made a wonderful pun on it, oh, say, and wrote the Defender's Poem, which very quickly hit the printing presses, and to the tune of An Acronym of Heaven, which was the English-British men's drinking song in every pub in Baltimore and everywhere around the colonies, never too hard to sing. It finally, it all caught on, and it went, in my verbiology, verbal in its day, as you will, of course, without the internet, but it traveled very quickly. People needed a song to sing. Before that, they had another colonial idea, but they had mostly sung Yankee Doodle Dandy, which doesn't have the fierce inspiration of Oh Say Can You See by the Dawn's Early Light, the song that we have cherished. They needed a song to sing. And General Jerry Boykin, who served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and over in the Gulf War, he heard me speaking at a meeting, and he said, Shelli, the national anthem is our patriotic anchor to national defense. Do not give up on this cause, because war definitely, now this is what I'm telling you, I have heard much going on in the halls of Congress, in meetings where I've been in the last week lobbying Congress for a year of Thanksgiving for the bicentennial of the national anthem. As I have been there in these meetings, I've suddenly seen staffers, congressmen, senators jump up and run to security meetings on the Hill, because we know what's happening in this vicious turn over in the Gulf is most likely going to bring war to our shores sooner or later. So right now, our people, like those of 1812, need a song to sing. They need something that tells them who they are. Our young soldiers rushing off to what will be a slaughter if we put boots on the ground need something that unites them in their hearts. And I just want to sing the last verse to you very briefly here, because you may not know it. And this should be sung everywhere, in football stadiums and everywhere that we go. There's much to preserve here. It's on the walls in a beautiful presentation at the new Fort McHenry Visitor Center. Vince Bass, a wonderful Christian man there, took a grant that was given on a rider several administrations ago to refurbish the Fort McHenry Visitor Center, and these words actually are put out there for the tourists to hear and see. And thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace, may the heavens rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, for our cause it is just, and this be our motto. In God is our trust. Oh, say does that Star Spangled Banner triumphantly wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. I call it the prayer verse. It prays, it decrees, and it declares a prophetic blessing on this nation that we are heaven's rescued land. And that picked up in the voices of millions of Americans this fall on September 14, the bicentennial. I believe would launch something in the heavens as heaven is listening, and launch something against the principalities and powers of the air and enemies on the ground who would be listening. Now, everywhere that I have gone to speak about this year, I've also played a video, which you can get on YouTube, called Singing Revolution, about the nation of Estonia when backed up against fierce opposition from communist forces trying to crush them in the new liberty that was given during Glasnost. They began to sing their own national anthem until suddenly it caught on in millions of voices with hands-trained conductors waving wands, millions of them in stadiums. The movie is quite moving. It's only a minute long. I challenge you to go and watch it. What it did to sing their national anthem brought them peace and security and their democracy without ever firing a shot. Now, our motto for Sing It America, which is the name of our organization, is sing it loud, sing it proud. It's your national anthem. Sing it America. But when we were working with Star Spangled 200, the official government commission on this, and Fort McHenry, we went to film on Flag Day 2012. This is at the beginning of this bicentennial, which coincides with the War of 1812 to 1814. I was asked to be the national anthem singer in Patterson Park to open all the ceremonies that night. I was told to arrive very early. I wouldn't find parking, and there would be thousands of people. When I got there, we were lucky if we had a crowd of 300. The frogmen jumping out of the plane to entertain the children didn't even know where they were landing, and they had no sound system organized for me. We had to do something off the computer. A little while later, we went to Fort McHenry. They were supposed to have fireworks that night. They didn't have enough to fill even a high school football field on the 4th of July. Another evening, I went back to film beautiful reenactors displays, absolutely phenomenal work these precious people had done, had rightly defined the battle and the victory and all that it meant. They'd done a great job, but their crowd was only local. And I was told again to park my car way over the bridge in downtown Baltimore, and that I would be taking a government-funded bus back to my car that night. When I got there, again, pitiful showing of the crowds. It was us four and no more. It was only Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, maybe parts of Washington, D.C., and maybe a few stragglers coming up and down I-95 seeing the sign for it and stopping in. And so after it was over, I said, the government buses, we only used 2. Not even the Blue Angels brought you the crowd you were expecting. What's wrong? And they said, don't worry about it. It'll get better. Well, the next year, my husband passed away. I lost some very valuable time in this whole window, but I went back. And I stepped back into it last fall, really to tell them I might resign because I had too much on my plate. And the overwhelming consensus was if you resign, there's nobody working with the national focus of this. It's all local. I said, I can see that. And I took my cameras down to the harbor and began to film children. And on my footage, we were working with a Nightline co-producer. He's a retired producer of Nightline from the National Press Club. I'm a member of the National Press Club. The National Press Club has helped me with this project. And we were going to put a special together for the History Channel and MSNBC if we could meet their benchmarks you need to meet in all the filming requirements. But I disappointedly came back and showed them my footage. I said, we can't do this. Look, 100% of the children didn't know what a national anthem was. Finally, when I said, do you know the football song? A few eyes lit. Then out of the adults that we interviewed, 80% or higher couldn't sing more than 3 lines. Never mind the high note. They never even got there. The only one who actually knew the entire anthem was a British admiral who had done his homework to come on one of the tall ships in the Baltimore Harbor, and 2 women in patriotic costumes. When I interviewed the head of the flag house there, with all of his special guests in a beautiful big flag they were featuring, and I clipped off that last verse that you just heard and said to him in the interview, what verse was that? He looked into the cameras and said, why did you change the national anthem? So I was very appalled. I went back and started doing research on the Internet. I only look for things with an AP stamp on it because I don't appreciate Internet, garbage of people just passing on fairy tales and fantasies. I want to know if it's been well researched. And I found AP stamp after AP stamp on Rasmussen Report, Washington Post, Parade Magazine, saying that 27% of Americans truly wanted to change our national anthem. I thought, well, with what I saw out that day in that Harvard, that'd be like taking candy away from a baby. Then as I researched it deeper, I found out it started actually in a Republican administration, unfortunately, several administrations back. It was passed a Democrat. It comes from the G20, demanding that we and other nations that belong to the G20 take the military adversarial language, as they deem it, out of our national anthem because it's too unfriendly to our world neighbors. And then, of course, they quipped along with that it was too difficult to sing. Well, it's not. It never has been. If men could sing an acronym to Heaven's Tune in an old British drinking pub, and all the children have learned it for over 2 centuries, then of course we can still sing it. The problem is that children don't know who they are in this generation, and they don't know what they're at risk of losing. My husband wrote that it was under attack. It was born under attack. And to replace it with something else would be less inspirational, less historical. We can't afford to let this happen. And then I found
Shelli, what can we do? I think you've given us an outstanding background for all of this. What are you doing, and what can we do to support the preservation of the national anthem and to see to it that the celebration coming up on September the 14th is indeed a national celebration?
Well, what we need to do is on September 14th, we have submitted a request of a permit to the Capitol Hill Police to use the north lawn of the Senate side of the Capitol building. When our resolution finds someone who has just a few moments of time to go to the floor and give it a resolution number. So if there's any Senate or Congress listening today to this call or any staff, please take this to heart. I know you're busy. I know you have till the end of August to get everything on your plate done for this session of Congress, but you can go onto our website at www.singitamericacom. You can look there where it says A Year of Thanksgiving for the Bicentennial National Anthem, and you can download the resolution letter, the draft. We'll be happy to work with anyone to finalize it, and also a Dear Colleague letter. My co-chair, Brian Rockmore, has successfully put forth A Year of Thanksgiving for the Bicentennial of the Constitution and Bill of Rights in the past, signed in the Oval Office by President Bush and President Reagan. We want the same thing to happen again in this administration. Once it does, we'll be able to initiate a nationwide celebration with it, not only for this year, but for next year, and put forth educational programs to help Fort McHenry. They lost their funding through the sequestering last year of the government shutdown. We'll be able to initiate with educators programs across the nation. Children don't memorize the national anthem anymore. That's part of the problem. Now, what we can do on September 14th, if you will call us or email us or fill out the contact form on that website, we will advise you of how to take the very simple steps of applying for a permit to utilize your own state house capital steps in your state. And we are asking you to gather 200 voices for 200 years. We've got a contest. You can ask people, whoever you know, wherever your influence lies, to upload themselves singing the national anthem on the same website. And we're going to choose 2 winners, a young and an old, from all 50 states. We're going to bring them to that Senate lawn and have a 200-voice choir. We invite you to be there. We're going to have some speakers that day. If the resolution is passed, which I see that, why shouldn't it? There's nothing controversial about it. Every office we leave, people are singing it and enjoying it with us. Just need somebody to walk it to the floor, give it a resolution number, and get the vote on it. Once that happens,
Shelli, does the resolution have a name that we can, if we speak to our senators and say, would you make sure that resolution, what's it called?
It doesn't have a number yet. We've submitted it to many senators and congressmen through the last 2 weeks, asking them to give the resolution, but the name we've given it is A Year of Thanksgiving for the Bicentennial of the National Anthem. Once it's passed, we can have a huge event on the Capitol steps, and we want to mirror that. I'm working with people in the National Press Code for all their local constituents in every one of the 50 states. We will have the different news agencies out there to cover that, to mirror that. on every Capitol steps or plaza. And so we're hoping to present this to the Governors Association. They've turned us down, saying the time was too short. They don't have the type of backbone that those men had to drop everything on that day in 1814.
One would think that the 200th anniversary of the national anthem would be a big deal and a rallying cry for people around the country. Now, one other question, folks, if you have any questions for Dr. Manuel, if you want to ask her a question, then press *6. We're not going to hold it too much longer, but if you have questions, press *6 and you can get your questions in. Shelli, is there? I noticed you say we need a left and a right wing. I think some of us would say, well, maybe we need two right wings, one on each side. But look, is there any serious effort underway in our country right now? Because so much is going on to change the national anthem, to actually replace it with something else. I've heard. Okay.
Yes, sir. There is. It was at 27% on the Rasmussen report if people wanted to change it. Then after the Patriot attack and the terrorists, tore up Boston, the number plunged to 15%. This is still way too high. When I was the Christian media director at the onslaught of the gay marriage battle at the Boston State House under Romney, I watched only 3% overwhelmed, 97% there, and they never even got a gay marriage law passed. And look what we're dealing with all over the nation. I was just on your call with Flowers, a few weeks ago. So this is way too high. Now, Miley Cyrus only needed 100,000 votes on We the People petition website that goes directly to the president and the Congress to get a resolution on the floor. And she got 90,000 signatures, came awfully close to arrogantly replace it with her own song, Party in the USA. Another one from Woody Guthrie in Oklahoma, where I am today, is This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land. That's Mr. Well, I'm not going to say something negative here, but that's going through the White House right now, along with America the Beautiful, which isn't so bad, but it doesn't have the same patriotic zing to it and, historical accounting as Francis Scott Key's Star Spangled Banner. But how could we sing This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land to the next terrorist?
Right, exactly.